Standards of vulgarity have shifted over time, yet some actresses were so uninhibited that they're still considered shocking by today's measures. These 20 stars nearly brought Hollywood to its knees with their unabashed openness and bold behavior. And number 11 will leave you speechless. Mae West. Mae West earned the vulgar label because she was unusually bold for her time. In the early 1930s, most actresses spoke politely and dressed modestly on screen. West, however, wrote her own play Diamond Lil, and later starred in films where she wore tight satin dresses, spoke in a slow, teasing voice, and filled her dialogue with playful double meanings. Parent-teacher groups and church leaders said her jokes would corrupt public morals, and the newly formed production code cited her movies as proof that Hollywood needed stricter rules. Even a Boston radio station removed one of her comedy sketches for sounding too suggestive. Rather than tone down her act, West leaned into the controversy, joking that censorship made her rich, because every complaint drew more people to the box office. Her fearless style turned criticism into a trademark, but it also locked her into the reputation of being the era's most vulgar star. Jean Harlow. Long before Marilyn's white dress, Jean Harlow's platinum halo blinded 1930s viewers. MGM bleached her hair until it shimmered like frost, then poured her into silk slips in Red-Headed Woman and Dinner at 8. Harlow didn't whisper. She fired slang across the set, calling suitors suckers and bosses big boy. Language critics said belonged on a loading dock, not inside a theater. Newsweek dubbed her the girl who made sin shimmer. In Red-Headed Woman, she played a secretary who marries her boss, slugs his wife, and seduces almost everyone else, complete with a scene where she locks a door and tosses away the key. State censors clipped frames, yet audiences lined sidewalks, proving scandal sells. When a columnist asked how she felt about being labeled vulgar, Harlow laughed. "Is that today's word? Yesterday they called me something worse." Her off-screen nightclubbing, often in backless gowns that dipped below the spine, fed gossip columns. Even so, co-stars praised her warmth, noting she minded her manners between takes. The contradiction fascinated the public. A Hollywood bad girl with a polite handshake. Harlow's sudden death at 26 froze that image forever. Dangerously alluring, eternally youthful, and still whispered about for daring to sound and look improper. Theda Bara roll back to 1915, when movies had no sound but headlines shouted. Enter Theodosia Goodman, rechristened Theda Bara. Studio publicists claimed her name was an anagram for Arab death. In silent smash, A Fool There Was, she lounges on a deck chair, eyes smoked with coal, beckoning a married man to ruin. One intertitle warns, "Kiss me, my fool." And audiences had never seen a woman command like that. Bara's posters draped her in snakeskins and tiger pelts. Church bulletins called her imagery satanic and vulgar temptation. On set, she remained soft-spoken, yet Fox Studios staged photo shoots beside occult props to feed the myth. Small-town exhibitors sometimes refused to book her pictures, fearing parish backlash, but rail cars of young fans arrived anyway. Though only a handful of Bara's films survive, her trademark, dark eyes, bare arms, deliberate wickedness, etched the word vamp into pop culture, shorthand for a woman allegedly too free with charm. By the early 1920s, the act had cooled, audiences pivoting to flappers. Still, every femme fatale that followed borrowed something from Bara. A slow smile promising danger, proof that early Hollywood's idea of vulgarity began with one woman who understood the power of suggestion in absolute silence. Marlene Dietrich Fogg, curls across a Berlin cabaret. A husky voice slices through, Marlene Dietrich singing Falling in Love Again. In Hollywood, she arrived trailing tuxedos, top hats, and a refusal to follow rules. Morocco, 1930, shows her kissing a woman on the lips before tipping her hat to stunned gentlemen, an act many states tried to cut but failed. She then slips into a white gorilla sleeve gown for Shanghai Express, purring lines that implied entire nights of adventure. Review boards labeled her immoral. Newspapers used vulgar as shorthand for her gender-bending wardrobe. Dietrich simply shrugged, saying, "Clothes have no sex." Off-camera, she hosted legendary dinner parties where guests found caviar beside sausages, high culture beside sailor songs. Wartime photos placed her at the front lines, singing for Allied troops in a suit once again. To moralists, she remained indecent. To soldiers shivering in foxholes, she was courage itself. Dietrich outlasted the word vulgar by turning every accusation into art, proving that a well-timed grin, a masculine cutaway, and the courage to blur lines could pull censorship's teeth while rewriting the very idea of screen allure. Jane Mansfield. If studios built Marilyn Monroe as champagne, they brewed Jane Mansfield as fizzy soda, sweet, loud, liable to spill. Arriving in Hollywood mid-1950s, Jane understood publicity better than most press agents. She accidentally popped out of a low-cut dress at one dinner, setting flashbulbs ablaze. Newspapers dubbed her the Queen of Wardrobe Malfunctions, though they used the kinder 1950s word, vulgar. In The Girl Can't Help It, she sachets past milk bottles that explode with foam, subtlety never her strategy. Britain briefly refused her cabaret act for indecency, and the Catholic Legion of Decency protested her film Promises. Promises, for featuring the first nude scenes by a major star. Mansfield smiled through every uproar, traveling with a heart-shaped bathtub on tour and a pet chihuahua named Galena Houndini. Off-screen, she read classical philosophy and spoke 5 languages, delighting reporters who expected empty chatter. Yet the bad taste label clung to her gowns, which designers measured in inches of skin rather than yards of fabric. Her tragic car accident in 1967 ended the story early, but the image remains. Pink spotlight, playful wink, and a Hollywood lesson that vulgar can sometimes just mean having too much fun for polite society. Hedy Lamarr, long before Wi-Fi patents, Hedy Lamarr shocked Europe in Ecstasy, 1933, with a skinny-dipping scene and an implied moment of private bliss. Though filmed before she reached Hollywood, U.S. customs officials nearly seized Prince as obscene. Vatican newspapers decried the film as vulgar art. When MGM unveiled her to American audiences, studio chief Louis B. Mayer warned gossip writers she was in a naughty European picture, but here she will be a lady. Still, Lamar's smoldering gaze in Algiers and Samson and Delilah carried a sense of forbidden fascination. Off-screen parties buzzed that she openly discussed love, science, and the male ego, unladylike subjects for 1940s columnists. During World War II, she co-invented frequency-hopping technology, now used in Bluetooth, but reporters preferred asking about romance. Lamarr later quipped, "Any girl can be glamorous. All she has to do is stand still and look stupid." The irony, she was never still, never stupid, and never truly escaped the early stain of being called vulgar. Today, her legacy balances genius and glamour, a reminder that sometimes the loudest critics focus on skin, while ignoring the brilliant mind beneath it. Betty Page. Dark bangs, bright smile, and that famous leopard print bikini, Betty Page was 1950s pin-up perfection. Yet her most notorious photos weren't cheesecake calendars. They were low-budget shorts featuring playful bondage themes. Senators streamed excerpts during a 1957 obscenity hearing, clutching pearls while Page cracked a whip and giggled. The press labeled the footage vulgar filth corrupting youth. Page had simply answered a casting call and treated the work like any other modeling gig. Off-set, she volunteered at church and baked cookies for neighbors, a contrast that confused moral crusaders. After leaving modeling, she vanished into religious schools and mental health struggles. Nearly forgotten until the 1990s, revival crowned her a cult icon. Modern fans see empowerment in her poses. Mid-century critics saw only scandal. Page's story shows how context shapes the word vulgar. What once spurred Senate alarms now decorates coffee mugs and fashion runways. Her shy grin reminding us that controversy often hides a surprisingly gentle soul. Rita Hayworth. Cue the Roomba beat and a single satin glove sliding off an upraised arm. Rita Hayworth's dance in Gilda, 1946, is still Hollywood shorthand for slow-burn allure. Yet in its day, the routine sparked protests. Hayworth removes exactly one glove, nothing more, but critics deemed it striptease by suggestion and lobbied for cuts. Life magazine celebrated the scene, while parent groups called it vulgar eroticism. Earlier, wartime pin-ups of Hayworth in a black lace negligee adorned barracks walls worldwide. Some military chaplains complained the photo lowered morale by raising temperatures. Off-screen, she was born Margarita Cancino, shy and bookish, practicing dance steps until her shoes tore. Hayworth hated the love goddess brand, admitting, "Men go to bed with Gilda, but wake up with me." Nonetheless, producers built each role around her hips' slow swirl, fueling the idea that her very presence was indecent. Hayworth's later life, marked by troubled marriages and early Alzheimer's, softened public judgment. Yet that single glove remains. A 3-minute masterclass in how little it takes for Hollywood to stamp a woman with the word vulgar. Clara Bow, the Roaring Twenties crowned Clara Bow the it girl, but some editors muttered a harsher word: vulgar. Raised in Brooklyn tenements, Bow brought real-life street slang to silent screens, laughing too loud, moving too freely for Victorian holdouts. In It, 1927, she dives headfirst into a department store display to win a boyfriend. Antics older critics called unladylike. Tabloids fixated on her nights at the Coconut Grove, where she danced the Charleston until sunrise and reportedly raced her car down Sunset Boulevard. Rumors, often exaggerated, painted her as reckless with language, lovers, and money. Moralists feared she glamorized flapper excess, especially when she posed in bathing suits without stockings. Scandalous in 1920. Yet fans adored her relatable energy. Young women copied her bobbed hair and carefree grin. After talkies arrived, Bow's thick Brooklyn accent drew ridicule, fueling gossip that the vulgar it girl was finished. She retired to a Nevada ranch, raising horses and avoiding cameras. Decades later, historians credit her with injecting movies with modern speed, proving that authenticity once dismissed as vulgar could, in hindsight, be pure cinematic oxygen. Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe's image is soft light on white silk, yet behind the lens lay a tug-of-war over taste. In 1951, she wore a gold lame gown so tight she could hardly sit. Columnist Earl Wilson labeled her cheap and vulgar, sparking headlines coast to coast. Monroe countered by posing in a potato sack, joking that critics would call even burlap indecent on her figure. In Niagara, she portrayed an adulterous wife, her walk filmed in slow motion. Review boards nearly trimmed the scene, calling the sway immoral. When Some Like It Hot dressed her in beaded dresses that seemed painted on, the Catholic Legion of Decency protested again. Yet Monroe balanced sensuality with vulnerability, flashing a shy smile that softened outrage. Off-screen, she read Dostoevsky and attended acting workshops, but reporters asked only about rumors of wardrobe mishaps. Marilyn once sighed, "A sex symbol becomes a thing, and I just hate being a thing." Still, the label stuck, reminding future generations how swift society can be to brand curiosity as vulgarity when a woman controls her own allure. Brigitte Bardot, French Sunshine, Saint-Tropez Waves, and Brigitte Bardot dancing barefoot in And God Created Woman, 1956. A scene that rattled international censors. The Catholic Legion of Decency condemned the film. U.S. mayors threatened bans. Headlines called Bardot sex on a beach towel, and Variety used the word vulgar more than once. Yet Bardot shrugged, explaining, "I am immaculate. I have nothing to hide." Her off-screen life, sunbathing topless long before it was common, fed magazines for years. Phalanxes of paparazzi stalked her, desperate for another indecent snapshot. Bardot's carefree attitude toward love, marriages, affairs, and a refusal to apologize conflicted with 1950s norms. Still, her performances carried genuine emotion, especially in Contempt, 1963, where a marriage dissolves amid Mediterranean views. As the 1970s dawned, Bardot stepped away from cinema to rescue animals, channeling the same fiery energy against cruelty. The world's one-time epitome of vulgar freedom traded bikinis for activist speeches, illustrating that the very traits once criticized, outspokenness, daring attire, unapologetic sincerity, also fueled a lifetime of passion, just redirected toward four-legged co-stars. Raquel Welch, a single publicity still. Raquel Welch, in a fur bikini from 1,000,000 years BC, decorated teenage bedrooms worldwide in 1966 and sent critics digging for adjectives. Vulgar surfaced alongside prehistoric. Welch followed with Myra Breckinridge, 1970, a satire so brash that Time magazine lamented tastelessness hits its nadir. The movie featured gender-bending gags and risque costumes. Reviewers blamed Welch for the shock, though she had little control over the final cut. Earlier, in Lady in Cement, her wet dive entrance prompted Roger Ebert to quip about vulgar exercises in cleavage. Off-screen, Welch challenged the double standard, saying if male heroes could bear chests, she could bear shoulders. She fought to be cast in comedies and dramas, proving herself in The Three Musketeers with slapstick swordplay. Decades later, she headlined fitness videos, sporting leotards still deemed too daring for breakfast television in some regions. Yet her poise and charitable work softened earlier judgments, revealing an actress who wielded beauty like a sword, but aimed it at adventure rather than shock. Sharon Stone. In 1992, the suspense thriller Basic Instinct featured an interrogation scene that turned Sharon Stone into headline shorthand for controversy. One quick leg cross, and newspaper editorials called it sleaze and gratuitous vulgarity. State censors debated trimming the few seconds. Some theaters slapped adults-only signs on posters, despite the film's R rating. Stone, then a relatively unknown actress, suddenly faced questions not about plot twists, but about morality. She argued the film portrayed a complex woman controlling a room full of men, a twist on decades of cinematic objectification. The label stuck anyway. Later roles in Sliver and Casino kept discussion of her screen boldness alive. But Stone balanced the narrative with public work for brain injury awareness after surviving a life-threatening hemorrhage. Interviews reveal a thoughtful performer who recognizes that one provocative decision can define an entire career, for better and worse. Her story echoes Hollywood's habit of painting women with broad strokes. Daring equals indecent, mystery equals menace. Yet Stone persists, proving intellect and resilience outlast any single flashbulb moment. Elizabeth Berkley. When Showgirls opened in 1995, critics pounced with unusual ferocity, calling it trash, vulgar carnival, even career suicide on celluloid. Elizabeth Berkley, fresh from teen sitcom Saved by the Bell, was suddenly the face of Hollywood excess. Senators referenced the film during debates on pornography ratings, although the plot centered on ambition and betrayal more than titillation. Berkley endured late-night jokes and studio cold shoulders, but she publicly stated that artists must risk failure. In time, Showgirls gained cult status, its over-the-top style now enjoyed as satire. Berkley reinvented herself on Broadway and cabaret and became an advocate for young performers, launching self-esteem workshops. Looking back, the Vulgar label says more about the 1990s culture war than about Berkley's character. Her journey offers a study in resilience, how an industry quick to brand someone with a scarlet letter can, years later, rewrite the same story as camp classic lore. Madonna pop icon Madonna stepped onto late-night screens in Body of Evidence, 1993, with candle wax, handcuffs, and an NC-17 rating. The MPAA cited vulgar sexual content, and newspapers declared the Queen of Pop had dragged Hollywood into the gutter. Yet controversy was Madonna's familiar dance partner. Earlier, her 1992 coffee table book Sex prompted bookstore boycotts and record sales spikes simultaneously. In film, critics overlooked her quieter roles, desperately seeking Susan, a league of their own, focusing instead on moments that pushed boundaries. Madonna defended her choices as explorations of power dynamics, arguing women should claim agency over desire just as men have for decades. Today, the once shocking scenes seem mild alongside streaming-era drama, reflecting how fast social barometers move. Madonna remains a reminder that Vulgar can be a baton passed from one generation to the next, only to be broken by the very woman it was meant to shame. Pamela Anderson, red lifeguard float in hand, hair streaming like sun-bleached silk. Pamela Anderson sprinting along Baywatch sands became 1990s pop shorthand for summertime fantasy. Critics sneered. Slow-motion vulgarity in prime time. Film roles like Barb Wire and Raw Justice amplified the backlash, with reviewers dismissing them as cheap throwbacks. Anderson acknowledged the caricature but insisted she owned her image, noting that action heroes in swim trunks rarely face the same ridicule. Beyond the beach, she campaigned for animal rights, speaking to legislative bodies in suits, not swimsuits. Yet headlines continued to reduce her to one word: vulgar. Years later, her candid memoir reframed the story, revealing childhood hardships and media manipulation. Anderson's arc shows how vulgarity is often a frame placed over someone who dares to monetize attraction while advocating for issues that matter. Kim Basinger's sultry jazz, dim lights, and Kim Basinger licking melted ice in 9.5 weeks, 1986, powered endless debates. Basinger called the film an emotional opera, but some critics labeled it soft porn masquerading as art. City councils weighed bans, churches warned congregants, and newspapers repeated the word vulgar. The uproar contrasted with her earlier roles as ingenue. Later, Basinger stunned Hollywood by buying an entire Georgia town to create a film studio. Headlines again smeared her dream as tacky extravagance. Financial troubles followed, yet she bounced back to win an Oscar for L.A. Confidential, playing a call girl patterned after Veronica Lake, but with wounded dignity. The transformation proved range beyond controversy, reminding audiences that depth can coexist with an earlier lightning rod reputation. Angelina Jolie. Long before humanitarian speeches, Angelina Jolie starred in Original Sin, 2001, a period drama heavy with candlelit love scenes. Reviewers groaned it was all sweat and vulgar excess, overlooking its noir plot twists. Earlier, Jolie's real-life interviews, discussing tattoos, vials of blood, and bold love letters, fed tabloids hungry for headlines marked indecent. Yet Jolie channeled that same fearless energy into UN missions, adopting children from war-torn regions and lobbying for refugee rights. Over time, the word vulgar faded, replaced by visionary. Her evolution illustrates Hollywood's fickle vocabulary. What shocks one season may inspire the next. Monica Bellucci. At the 2002 Cannes premiere of Irreversible, viewers fled the theater, some calling the film cruel, vulgar, and unwatchable. Monica Bellucci, who played the victim of a brutal crime, defended the film's raw warning about violence. Though the discomfort centered on a single harrowing sequence, headlines glued the vulgar brand to her name. Yet Bellucci's earlier work, Milena, The Matrix Reloaded, proved her elegance and linguistic dexterity. Fluent in Italian, French, and English, she often quoted philosophers during press junkets, defying stereotypes. Age has not dulled her impact. Fashion houses still seek her timeless poise. Critics now revisit Irreversible as a bold artistic statement, conceding that vulgarity sometimes lies not in showing pain, but in pretending it never happens. Bellucci's career urges audiences to examine who decides which stories are proper, and why a woman's bravery in confronting darkness once drew the swiftest condemnation. Mamie Van Doren. Imagine 1950s drive-in theaters glowing against summer sky, engines idling while Mamie Van Doren boogies on screen in Untamed Youth. The plot involves chain gang farmhands and rock and roll numbers. Reviewers called it corny, noisy, occasionally vulgar fun, with emphasis on vulgar. Universal Pictures hired Mamie to rival Monroe and Mansfield, advising her to show the curve every chance you get. She obliged, donning tight sweaters and singing tunes labeled too suggestive for radio. The studio even issued her a champagne gold convertible for publicity stunts, instructing her to wave as if blowing kisses. Church bulletins warned teens that Van Doren's movies glamorized juvenile delinquency. She laughed it off, saying, "Delinquent? I never even got a parking ticket. Just hearts." Off-screen she performed for troops in Vietnam, cracking jokes cleaner than her screen persona. In later years, Mamie embraced satire, appearing in documentaries about 1950s censorship, still proud that her once scandalous wiggle now looks positively tame. Her life illustrates how fashions shift, morals relax, and yesterday's vulgarity becomes tomorrow's cheeky nostalgia. From silent-era snake jewelry to slow-motion ocean runs, these 20 women show how the label vulgar often signals nothing more than a shifting line between comfort and curiosity. Each time the line moved, Hollywood history moved with it, proof that pushing boundaries, however politely or provocatively, is how new ground gets claimed on the silver screen.